By forcing people to have children, you're keeping them in this cycle where they can't get out of poverty, they can't get out of debt. And I don't think that's accidental. That cycle keeps the people who are on top on top. We don't want women in the Alabama Senate. We don't want people of color in the Alabama Senate. We don't want LGBTQ plus people in the Alabama Senate. We don't want immigrants anywhere in the state, in the country. I'm not a politician by any means, but seeing what's going on, it makes me want to learn and run and get these people out of office.
Women's reproductive rights are under assault.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and watch the film.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And it was a really, it was not always easy to, especially right now, to be watching your film because of the nature of it. It's a triggering kind of topic, right? I'm sure you're running into that.
Yeah, I feel like everyone, by and large, I've shared the film with has been like, it's infuriating, outrage-inducing. Is
that a word? Right.
Outraging. And, I think really catalyzing people to want to take action and react and respond, which is what has to happen now.
How did you how did you get inside of this community? It's essentially a youth or student driven pro-life movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the film, which is called Battleground, is also introduces, I think, people like myself to the diversity of the pro-life movement. It's not just evangelicals, which is,
Mm-hmm.
and other, let's say, hypocrites, but it's but it's actually more nuanced than that too, which came as something of a surprise as I watched it.
Yeah, I think I was definitely surprised and had sort of a lot of my preconceived notion about who anti-abortion people are and who is in the anti-abortion movement were really challenged in the process of making this film. To answer your first question about just how I got inside this community, originally, when I started the film in the summer of 2019, it was right after Alabama had been the first state to pass a total abortion ban. And it was just so kind of like blatantly and boldly and unabashedly unconstitutional. And I was curious what was going on the ground in Alabama and kind of what the impacts of having this ban that was signed by the governor were. And I went down there and I started filming with several pro-choice advocates that you meet in the film. But I was starting to get this feeling like I was like kind of like in the weeds. Like I really was like, how is this happening? Like I really want to understand what the power dynamics are that are making it possible for states like Alabama to pass these bans, or for the decades worth of various kinds of abortion regulations to be enacted. And that was when I decided, I think I really need to talk to the anti-abortion movement and just, kind of, it started sort of purely from my own curiosity of like, who are these people? And like, how are they doing this? Like, they represent the minority of Americans. The vast majority of Americans support abortion access and abortion rights. And so I was really just curious, like how they're managing to do what they do and be really so successful at enacting all this anti-abortion legislation. And so I approached Marjorie Dannenfelser, Kristen Hawkins, and Teresa Bukanovic and said, look, putting aside one's personal perspective or opinions on abortion, the power of the anti-abortion movement and influence of the movement on American policy, legislation, and culture is a fact. And I think it's a fact that's worth exploring and understanding. And my pledge to them was that I would film with them and depict their work and their perspectives in their own words and as accurately and thoroughly as I could. And that was really where they agreed to participate in the film and give me access to follow them. And, as you're saying, Students for Life of America, their work, and cooperate with the filmmaking process.
Yeah, and as far as the results go, I don't think really if any of those folks that participated that you just mentioned really could have a problem with the film, because it's a very fair and it's a very unbiased view. You gave them quite a lot of space to give a very nuanced presentation of their ideas and their agenda, and so
and that's been their response, that they feel the film accurately and respectfully depicts their position and perspective and work and views. And I think it is what it is. That is what they are doing and what they believe and what they've been up to.
Most people, I mean, I guess what I'm sitting there through there, I guess I kind of almost see all of their ideas as ones that are fair for them to be. They have every right to feel and to present, except for the idea that I wonder if they understand that illegalizing abortion doesn't stop abortion. So that's the main problem. If it's actually stopped abortion, then I could see, well, this is a good idea for somebody who feels as strongly as they obviously do. But it doesn't work. So why not take a different tact, like one that actually might in the long run stop people from needing abortions? Like, I don't know.
Right. Like economic policy, criminalizing, having much stronger criminalization of rape.
Right. Yeah.
Protecting young people from incest. Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. And yet at the end of the day, there will always be unwanted pregnancies. Birth control fails. It's not always 100% effective. Life comes up, or there are numerous women. I don't know a single woman who either herself or someone very close to her hasn't had a complication during pregnancy that required termination of that pregnancy. It is completely common that there are dire fetal anomalies or dire healthcare circumstances for the health of the woman that make carrying a pregnancy to term dangerous. Pregnancy itself is far, far more dangerous than abortion. And so, I think that, to your point, there's sort of like a very kind of like, sort of like blinders on toward this goal that they have to make abortion illegal in the United States. But as you say, abortion is an important and necessary part of pregnant people's healthcare. And another woman in the film who kind of gets into a back and forth with Kristen Hawkins, the head of Students for Life, says, you're not going to make abortion impossible. You're just making it inaccessible.
Right.
Yeah, you're just making access harder, but people are always going to need to get abortions.
Yeah, you're speaking of what seems to, maybe a West Indian student, or she or was West Indian American, who was sort of the superhero of the movie, turns out.
Yeah.
Sure. Clearly that's
raising the point, that like people who are trying to obtain an education, who need loans to get through college, who are struggling to support themselves, to advance their goals and their families' abilities to fulfill their dreams, that imposing the economic burden of having children on people who are in these, it's just not fair.
So the film is called Battleground, and it what festivals did you play in
So-
festivals?
So we just had our world premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival.
Oh, you
just
were
a
there.
few weeks ago. Yeah,
Okay.
and I would
Sorry, I missed
love.
you.
Well, the thing I will mention is that because of the decision coming down last Friday, we have now made the film available on the Tribeca at Home platform. So if you go to the Tribeca Film Festival and look up Battleground, it's now available extended through July 3rd. So you can still catch it as kind of part of the festival in that online dimension.
Very good. And do you have a plan? That's great. We'll send people that way to see the documentary. And what did you? I guess did you have any other? I don't know. Were there any other obstructive things that came up in your effort to make this film, or did you get a lot of support?
There were various challenges. Certainly one was that I knew kind of early on that I wanted to film over the course of 2020 because it was an election year and because the anti-abortion Christian right had such a huge role to play in the initial election of Donald Trump. And because they had turn their voters out, as you see in a scene of sort of the behind the scenes deal making between Donald Trump and the leaders of the Christian right. He had done so much to advance the agenda of the Christian right because of this sort of relationship of sending their folks out to the polls to vote for him. He'll do their bidding. So we knew that this kind of relationship between abortion and politics would be very much on display over 2020. We couldn't have anticipated the extent to which that became true when Justice Ginsburg died and Amy Coney Barrett was nominated and then confirmed. And what you see in the film is like this quite literal relationship between the leaders of the anti-abortion movement, namely Marjorie Dannenfelser, pointing to Amy Coney Barrett as the person that they want put in that seat. And that is indeed what ends up happening. So those were some of the sort of like confluences of just the extent to which this phenomenon was on display. But then, of course, we had the pandemic. So there were some challenges in terms of, I think, as an industry, we've really been creative about finding ways to capture stories in these really unprecedented times. So there were times where we did interviews remotely and had local teams go film rather than everybody flying out. There were times where we couldn't send anyone out to film, and we had subjects themselves record themselves with their iPhones. We did a few Zoom interviews. So that was a challenge that, you sort of had to like make those adjustments. And then, of course, I think going to the kind of funding entities that be in this industry and saying, hey, we're following 3 leaders of the anti-abortion movement. Can you please, get on board and fund this film and help us get this out there? I think there are a lot of folks who are like, I get what you're doing. I think it's important. I'm nervous about that. And we had a lot of really courageous supporters, Safe Space Pictures Foundation, EPs Nicole Shipley and Ryan Harrington, Ruth Ann Harnish and the Harnish Foundation, Dexter Braff, Fifth Man Pictures, and several other really key supporters who really saw why we were taking the approach we were taking, really understood the value of it, and just totally were, shoulder to shoulder with us in getting this film made.
Have you been in touch with any of the subjects from the film since Roe was struck down?
I have not been in direct touch with them since Roe was struck down last Friday. They have certainly been very much prominent in the media that's been out there. So Kristen Hawkins has been all over the videos the New York Times is putting out, CNN. So whenever you see footage of people celebrating the decision, they've been very much kind of front and center.
Are you making progress with distribution, or are you?
Yeah, so
you may not be able to discuss something like that necessarily, but I'm trying to inch closer to seeing when.
So we are in several conversations with the powers that be around distribution. So hopefully we'll have more to share on where the film will be publicly available very soon. We are also getting invitations from tons of film festivals domestically, internationally. So I think that we'll be having a very robust festival run. Particularly,
Excellent.
I think a lot of people outside of the US are looking in and saying,
Oh, sure.
what is going on?
I don't even know. And but yeah, it's interesting because as number of Catholic countries, if you want to say, or Christian countries are becoming, are providing now, or have removed laws preventing abortion, or the restriction of abortions, there people must be scratching their heads and trying to understand why this country, always sort of the, example of progressive Western progressive politics, would be turning the other direction. It's very confusing.
And I think that's why it's really important for people to understand the power dynamics at play, because again, people are not wrong that the United States is an example of a country where the majority of people hold progressive values on things like access to abortion. And yet you have a minority of people who have, in the words of Alexis McGill Johnson in the film, sort of captured these levers of power and are using abortion as an issue to harness single issue voters that are making enough of a difference to tip the balance in certain districts. We are gerrymandered out of any kind of accurate representation of the will of the voters. And you have a party, the Republican Party, who are shamelessly using anti-abortion policies to consolidate their political power and are in this race to the bottom with the most extreme anti-abortion legislation that is not an example of leadership and does not benefit their constituents or the views of their constituents or the needs of their constituents. And yet it's what gets a certain number of people out there to the polls quite reliably.
Well, hopefully there'll be a sequel to Battleground with a more aspirational ending. Although I think it's very much worth watching, because you will see you have some wonderful also pro-choice subjects in your film, which do an incredible job of speaking for those others, the silent majority, or maybe too silent majority at the moment. But I appreciate your making time to come on here and talking to me. It was really nice to meet you.
Oh, it was great to meet you, Adam. Thank you so much. I really
Anytime,
appreciate it.
We can do it again.
That'd be great.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.